Hey everybody, welcome to How the Sausage is Made with Chris Cosentino, where I talk with chefs, restaurateurs, athletes, philanthropists, and pretty much anybody that inspires me. We look below the surface, behind the curtain, and dig deep into how these people got to where they are today. Wins, losses, and everything in between. All right, everybody, I am very excited to welcome Chef Mark Tarbell to the podcast. This man has seen things. This man is cooking up a storm. Many, many years cooking up a storm. I have known him through Mark Miller, and I'm really excited to have him here to tell his story. Chef, thank you.
Thank you, Chef. It's an honor to be on your call, man. I always enjoy time with you.
So, Mark, when did it start for you? Like, what was that catalyst? Like, were you hanging out with grandma? Was it watching, old Julia Childs on TV, or is it just by chance?
Well, it kind of found me for a lot of reasons. I'll explain that if we have time. But
yeah,
I really just, frankly, I know I used to tell stories like, yes, my mother, did it. Yeah, right. I mean, it's true. My mother did cook. She really did. And she was, at 60% of the time it was edible. I'm going to be honest. And I love you, Mom, but it's true. And sometimes it was brilliant. There were certain things she did do, though. She baked all the bread we ever ate until I was 11. So, I grew up in a small town area. We didn't even know there was bread from the store. And then I found Wonder Bread. You know what that is? Maybe some people do. And I was like, holy shit, this is bread. But what it was is, I was just hungry all the time. So for me, the fastest way to get there was to cook. So, as a kid, I was fast and I was obsessed with flavor and texture. I can say that now because I would literally spend a summer eating bags and bags of dried apricots, just sitting behind a chair in the living room, thinking about each flavor and letting it melt in my mouth. And I've been basically doing that my whole life. And whether it be water or sweetened condensed milk when I was a kid or whatever, I'm obsessed with texture, flavor, and things like that. So I do think that was an early interest for sure. And then for me, it started with a job, being a dishwasher during high school. And I was always hungry and you could eat everything off the plate. Chef, I don't know if you remember those days, but that was the privilege, is you could eat what wasn't eaten off the plates. And
which you can't do now, folks.
Which is illegal and wrong.
It's illegal and wrong and dangerous.
Be disgusted, but that's the way it really was. And so as a high school kid, making a small amount of money, it was great to eat. But I did notice that the chefs got to make their own food. And so I said, I want to do that. So,
and what kind of restaurant was this?
Okay, this is great. I was in a Mexican restaurant in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in the 70s. So if you can imagine Mexican food in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in the 70s, and the reason I hated Mexican food for a very long time until I moved out west was it was ground beef, ketchup, and Tabasco sauce. That was taco meat. And so I know people,
That is so funny because so where in Portsmouth, New Hampshire was this? Because I spent my entire childhood going to Portsmouth, New Hampshire to ski.
It was across from Gilly's Diner, in kind of the downtown area. It was in a back alley. So that's where I started as a dishwasher. And then I went to the Wentworth Hotel. I'm sure you know that. And
yes.
I worked as a dishwasher in the pit there. I was in the pit, which was as a young boy and testosterone driven. I was in the worst part. I would come home, covered with slop.
That's hysterical. But I can see that, right? It's a busy hotel, big, massive dish pit. And as a kid, let's be honest, as a kid in a dish pit, you are definitely not the most efficient human on the planet. You're you're a mess. You're just a hot mess. And you're you have a job, you're stoked.
Yeah.
You're making money.
And, I just started, truly a neighbor, and this is a true story. A neighbor of ours gave me a cookbook called La Technique by Jacques Pepin. And I was, I think, 15 or something like that. And it was just before summer. And and this wasn't at a time when, even Jacques might have been on TV, but certainly Julia was off air for a while there, and there was no celebrity chefs for Food Network. And I was obsessed with it. And I am an obsessive compulsive person. So I went through the whole book and did every technique that summer and drove my family crazy for sure. But I really just found it fascinating, and eventually got a job as a cook, but it was again as a job. And my grandma said, do you ever think about doing this as a living? And I was like, no, I would never do this. I want to be I want to be a businessman or, like a lawyer or something like that. Of course, I didn't have the grades or the discipline to do that. But anyway, so I out of high school, and I'm going to wrap this up. I had a gap year, which was, it sounds really fancy now. I had no options, chef. That's why I had a gap year.
Me neither.
I had zero options, but I did get a gig as a full apprentice, one of the 3 apprentices they took on at Sonesta Hotel in Amsterdam for a year. 2 Dutch kids and me. So I was popular as an American taking a slot. But, that's where it changed for me. I mean, a 64-year-old Swiss chef who'd been all over the world and incredibly tough, really brutal, everything you read about, except he didn't actually physically hit you, but, a lot of crazy stuff. But he was just very disciplined. It was all standards driven toughness. People talk about screaming and yelling and demeaning. He wasn't that. He was standards driven, but he was brutal and he was loud and he was always trying to fire everybody. That was his number one job in life, is to fire you. You either did the job correctly or he was just going to be out to get you. So that's when it lit up for me. And I just loved that discipline and that rigor.
You said something earlier, which is, you had said, no, I don't. I want to be an attorney or, an architect or a businessman, but you didn't have the determination. But that's actually not true. You just had a different direction for your determination.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to point out, because you have to be determined to succeed in this business.
Yes. It's in so many ways.
It's just different, right? Like, it's different determination. It's different direction. So I disagree with what you said earlier. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. I agree. And I think it was just more that it wasn't a pathway at the time. There wasn't like a career. There was no celebrity. There was no notoriety. It was, it was work. But in that way, Chris, it was pure. It is still the work. That's the thing that I think people get away from, is that, there's 2 times. I always like to say there's 2 times when your restaurant business is hard: when it's busy and when it's slow. Otherwise, it's easy.
That's a really great quote right there, because it's so true. When you're slammed, you're fucked. And when you're slow, you're even more fucked.
100%.
Right? And I think people don't, there really is in the middle.
No. And the other thing, and you've had a lot of celebrity, and I tell kids this. I said, if you have a restaurant and you work hard, or you're a chef and you get notoriety, the only thing that happens is you get busier. You work harder. In some things where you get notoriety or success or things like that, you can cruise and hire a team, and not so much in the restaurant business. There's no avenue for that.
Well, you also, and I think the other thing that is, you're under more scrutiny. The more reviews you get, the better reviews you get, the more scrutiny you're under. And I think that makes it also harder, because the bar gets raised every single time. Because if they set the bar here, you have to be above the bar. You always have to be above that bar that's set for you, because the judgment level is getting higher and higher and higher. Yeah. So you just have to keep getting better and better at what you do. And I think that's a really true point. The more, if you're on TV, people come in, they have expectations, and they're it just makes it more. It's always more.
And different in a way for me, the only plug I'm going to give on this whole thing is I'm like not a very good restaurant. It's just a neighborhood joint. Come and hang out, wear clothes. That's a legal thing. You have to do that. But otherwise, it's a pretty basic restaurant, and it was designed that way. And now we're an iconic restaurant, been around, had a lot of attention, but the DNA is that it's simple. But the reason for that, to your point about, if you get a lot of press or you're on TV, people then dream up their own expectations of what it's going to be, instead of being curious or open and come in and go, what is it? Because you, chef, you design the menu, you design the experience. They have their own idea of what that is. It's not what you've designed necessarily. So you're more set up for disappointment, because it's not aligned with actually who you are as a chef or a restaurateur. So I find it to be challenging, to have, look, we all need press, right?
No, but I think that's actually a really good point, because there is expectations that people walk in the door with. And let's be honest, if somebody had a bad day at work before they come in, their expectation is skewed. and their behavior is skewed. And it's really hard to get them out of that funk from earlier in the day. So you may never be able to reach their expectations. Yeah. So, and that's the goal of having great service, right? Yes. You can have mediocre food and incredible service, and that can change the world. But if you have mediocre service and incredible food, it just doesn't work.
I'm glad you said it, Chef. So many people need to say that, because as a chef, and you are, I've been saying that to people quietly for years, but that service is king, like my chefs and stuff. And they're like, well, you're just, you're not being loyal to what really makes restaurant work. And I'm like, actually 100% of the people know how they've been treated and how they feel. Not everyone knows what they've eaten.
True. That's a great way. And I think having worked both sides, right? Like as a kid, I worked in the front of the house, and I think understanding that and then going into the kitchen, I think is really important, right? Because you see both sides. You know how hard it is in the kitchen because you've been there, but then also everybody there is, and you know this, there's comments like they don't work as hard as we do. They work less hours. They just polish silverware and glasses. Look, they're dealing with they're dealing with people who are nervous for getting engaged in the restaurant. They're dealing with anniversaries. They're dealing with birthdays. They're dealing with loud people, drunk people. They're dealing with all of these things with grace. Yes. Sometimes not so much grace. There's moments when they wet the bed too, right? Both sides have their bad days. Yeah. But we also have to remember they're always on to the public. When they walk in, they got to like when you go to Vegas, when you're leaving the underbelly in one of the hotels, you have to go pick up your costume. It's not your uniform, it's your costume, because you're in a show. You're in a play, right? Oh. You're a play, part of a gigantic play inside the casino. It's the same thing in the restaurant. They show up in their uniform or costume, and they're meeting those guests, and they're having to meet and to go above and beyond expectations. And people remember that. If I'm correct, Emerald said it was from when the tip of their toe touches the curb to when they're leaving and their last heel leaves that curb to get in their car. That's when the whole experience starts and ends.
Yes. I couldn't agree with him more. Well said. And it's the hardest job in the world because you're the ultimate middleman. You have no control over the guest and you have no control over the kitchen.
That's so true, man. So what was that next step for you? Like you're in Europe, and what was that like doing that in Europe? Because I think, and what year was that? Because I think staging in Europe and having an internship in Europe, for a lot of people is their dream, right? Yes. I unfortunately never got there to do that as a young cook. I did it much later in my career because I didn't have the grades to get the internship through school. And to be honest, I was scared shitless of the language barrier.
Yes. Well, for me, it was, supreme ignorance. I didn't know I didn't know. And I came from a fairly small town and area, where I came from. Yeah. But, I think it was because I was so innocent, and so young, and it was in the early 80s. I was very open to anything. I didn't speak Dutch, but as it turns out, neither do they. English, I think, is their first language.
Yeah.
But the kitchen was international. There was Japanese, Egyptian, Chinese, Austrian, everything, Swiss, and there was 2 Dutch chefs. One was a sous chef. So it was an English-speaking kitchen, as it turned out, and with all kinds of other languages and cultures. So for me, it was just mind-blowing and opened my mind. Outside of the work part, it was just so good for me to be outside of this country and really experience that. And I was lucky that the chef was really old school and very disciplined about the whole thing. He knife cuts and sharpening. I couldn't even cut anything until I learned how to sharpen a knife. And then I had to sharpen everybody's knives to razor sharp. So I had to dry shave my arms, and I had no hair on my arms because I had to dry shave everybody's knives. Everybody's, not just mine, perfectly. And then I was allowed to cut stuff.
But see, that is really interesting. Like, he forced you to sharpen your knife and then everybody else's to guarantee that you really understood the practice moving forward.
Yeah, I did it every week for everybody.
And if you didn't sharpen somebody else's knife properly, you would hear about it. So that pretty much guaranteed that you were going to learn that skill really well, really quick. or the poissonnier or the entremet would come to you and be like, dude, what's this? This is garbage.
Yeah.
Right. So like it all rolled downhill pretty quickly. But that's an amazing way of instructing because it's repetition, and it also gave you a regimented system, but then it also gave you accountability. You were accountable to your peers.
Yes. And, the thing is, I wanted to be quick and efficient and good at it so I could cut a carrot. That was my dream. Like I could actually cut a carrot.
That's so crazy. It wouldn't let you do. But I mean, that's gone on for years, right? Like that's how it works worked everywhere.
Yeah.
So how long was that internship? Like what was that?
So the apprenticeship it's a year-long apprenticeship in Europe. Typically, it's like a trade school kind of arrangement over there. It's very common. I mean, over there, it's not unusual for apprenticeships or going into the trades, of culinary trades, to do it. So I took one of those spots at the hotel. And, this is true. I didn't make any money. It was like $196 or $8 take home a month. Actually, my gross was about $5,000, but my take home was about $198. I'm kidding. But, it was very small. And so I didn't live well. Everyone talks about these things. You talked about living in a bathtub. I lived in a room of a crazy person in a very bad part of outside of Amsterdam. And, like a war zone, like burned out apartments, and, it was pretty rough. But so I didn't have enough money to get home. I bought a one-way ticket to get to Amsterdam, and I couldn't make enough to live. So I was determined to graduate to commis de cuisine, which is first level cook, before my apprenticeship was done, because I wanted to get back home eventually. And I did. And I think I ended up getting that promotion about 8 or 9 months in, and made like $300 a month or something like that. And I made enough for a one-way ticket back to the States. So that was my story.
That's crazy. I mean, but
that's so true.
Those are the times, right? And I think that is one of the hard parts about our business, right? There is a cost to the knowledge, right? And I think the cost to the knowledge is sometimes a detriment to us, right? It's our time, it's our physical health, but also our living situations can't always work out for us. So you came home, and what was that next moment for you?
Well, determined to go to culinary school. Like at that point, I knew I loved it. I think I know, chef, you're like this, it grabs you. I mean, once it's in, it's like, you're done, you're baked. So I was determined to go to culinary school. At the time, there was CIA, and that was about it, or go to like the Cornell hotel school, which I was not qualified to go to. So I applied all over Europe, and there was a school in Paris called École de Cuisine La Varenne, Anne Willen School, and they took 10 professional students a year, a lot of tourism. It was like, sort of like whatever, the blue, Cordon Bleu, which is more tourism, week-long classes. But this had a full professional program, 6 days a week, and there were 10 students a year, and there was a 3-year waiting list. And I just bugged them and 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 bugged them. And there was a cancellation, and they said, finally, if you promise never to call again, but send a check, you're in.
Don't call, send a check. Yes, you can.
And please shut up when you get here. Don't ever talk to us. So I got in there, and again, poor thing. I worked. I lived in a servants' quarters, in the top of an older building, and cooked for a family. There was no kitchen or bathroom in the servants' quarters. A tiny room, and you shared your Turkish toilet. I won't go into what that is, but I'm sure you know what it is. And one shower with, I think it was like 12 different servants units. They were all filled with people. So it was an interesting situation, to say the least.
Wow.
You're going to have to delete this later. I may have peed out the window more than once.
That's actually amazing. I would have done the same thing.
I mean, like, I'm not going down to this thing in the midnight. It's not happening.
So what was that like, attending school in Europe? Like,
magical. I mean, tough. I mean, school wasn't as hard as an apprenticeship, because you're paying, and they're somewhat nicer. But it was a great school because she is well connected, and she brought in a lot of the top chefs and young and new chefs coming in through France or Paris to do the Saturday classes. And then Chef Chambret had a 2-star restaurant in Paris for, I think, 30 years. He was great. He was the main guy. And anyway, it was really good. if you were applying yourself. It was great because as an apprentice in a real kitchen, you can't use it or touch anything. You can't trim a tenderloin unless you get to that point where you're allowed to or trained to. And there you could cook anything, like you could destroy anything. So you had the freedom of using truffles and all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to experience in a kitchen. And it was more being in Paris. For me, it was a magical time. I even knew it that as a young person, you don't often understand how cool things are when you're doing it. But I actually thought it was pretty cool as well, even though it was hard. And I did an apprenticeship at a 1-star. And then I did a brief apprenticeship at Tarbell, a 3-star. And then I worked in a butcher shop briefly. And those were great too. I just loved it. I loved it.
You said something that I think is really important. It's like you were make the most out of it, right? You were given the opportunity and kind of given free rein as a student with being able to play with ingredients and do things. But it's no matter where you are, it's about how you make the most out of it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's a tenderloin over there. I could watch them do it over there, but I'm going to trim it over here. Whether I screw it up or not, it's either going to become staff meal or we're going to have a great dish. And I think that was not that I'm saying it, that cooks run over to the meat station and start cooking things for free, like chaos. But I think there's a drive and a want. And when you have that drive and want and you're in school and you're doing internships, you're taking apprenticeships at different restaurants, at butcher shops, that's taking the initiative to move forward instead of waiting for somebody to say, hey, do you want to come and do this? Like,
oh yeah.
Initiative goes a long way.
At least in our business, at least in my experience, no one gives you anything. You have to go get it. And if you want to grow in a kitchen, I still think this is true, although I'm not sure the culture is changing a lot. You have to be just 10 times better than everybody else. And if you create I know that's hard for some people, a highly competitive environment, but if you're in a kitchen and you've been in a kitchen, you understand it's by nature, by its pure nature, a very highly intense competitive environment. And it's because it's time, talent, product, and expectations and drive. I mean, customers just don't understand when they order a steak, why it doesn't come in 8 minutes. They don't care. But you back there in the kitchen have to engineer systems and training and talent and skills to make it happen consistently, night after night after night, dish after dish, without fail. And so
I think it's really running a restaurant and cooking for the public, your guests, is similar to surgery, right? Mm-hmm. Everything has to be done efficiently, clean, right? To a system and with technique, because if any of those are messed up, you have a big problem at the end, right?
Yes.
It comes back to bite you, whether the guest leaves and gets sick because you weren't clean, right? Or the technique isn't right, and that means it's poorly cooked or poorly sliced, right? And there's all these, and it's a very similar, and we have sense of urgency in both places.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
And what happens if something gets returned. That cascades the rhythm.
Yeah. So if you make one wrong cut in the operating room, that cascades out of control, which creates more problems. It's the same thing in the kitchen. You overcook something, you miss a fire. So I think, yes, we're not saving lives, right? But we do have that same level of urgency and expectation when people walk in the door. And it's the same thing, service too, right? That's part of it, right? And I think recognizing that, and like you said, it's that you want it, you have to go get it, right? And it's like, and the customer doesn't see that. The goal is for the customer to never see that, never see the chaos, which is kind of funny that they opened up the kitchens for so long for the guests after a while to see the chaos, right?
Yeah. Well, I've worked for years trying to make my customers believe I don't really work. And I think that's been an extraordinary mistake. But I mean, I was up at 5 a.m. I mean, I'm 31 years in at Tarbell's and I'm still there at 6. But so I think one of the things I explain to customers, and it may help with people, is, our window, where we pass over plates is maybe 8 or 9 feet long. It's probably 14 or 16 inches wide. And let's just say we do 200 covers and everyone gets, 3 courses. That's, 600 plates in 3 hours over a 9-foot line. It just kind of shows you the intent, and it all has to go out like magic at the same time. Like you can't just send a 6 o'clock's 2 tops, one meal out, and then the other person at the table at 9 get their other entree out. It has to happen magically in concert. So
it's a lot. It's a lot of pieces every day.
Yeah.
So school, how long was your schooling?
That wasn't very long. So I think there was an intense program of about a year. We went 6 days a week, days and nights, and then Saturdays. And then we had apprenticeship programs. And then I stayed after for, I was there about almost a little over 3 years in Paris. I just, was working as much as I could under the table. It was same as anywhere in the world. They weren't favorable to having foreigners working there. Especially illegally. So I got chased out of a couple places a couple times, but but I made it. I made it for as long as I could. And I had a choice of getting married to a French girl who I hadn't met yet, or coming home and getting a real job.
How's your French now?
It's really pretty good. I was fluent then. I could read and write and speak, and I had a lot of fun with the language. It's a great language. And I was back there in March, and I'm fine. I know I'm not like as good as I used to be because I don't have the opportunity to speak very often here in Phoenix, Arizona. Surprising.
So what was that like re-entering back into the States and kitchens in the States coming from Paris? I mean, that's a very different work style, right? You got your splits, right?
Yes.
You work in splits. That wasn't a thing here.
Yes.
6 days a week was the norm there, right?
Yes.
Splits and a 6. What was that like coming back here and walking into a kitchen here?
As any young person who thinks they know everything, I was a bit snobby about certain standards. And, to a degree, it's true. The French kitchens were the most highly organized and high standard kitchens at the time. I think that's changed, and there's more in the world. But at any rate, I really wanted to open a wine bar. I was obsessed with that. It was a new thing back then. And so I worked I think originally first for a wine bar in Boston as a sous chef, but it was really an Italian restaurant with a big, huge Coravan, wine bar, wine system. And I really loved it. It was a small kitchen, very intense. I knew there was only 3 of us on the line. I was a sous chef, and always someone else, and then someone on pantry and dish. So it was a very high volume, very intense situation. But the standards of excellence really weren't there. The execution, knife cuts, preparation of sauces and bases and stocks and demi and all that stuff. It didn't exist. And that the chef ended up leaving, and I took over and did my best to elevate everywhere I was. And I worked as a baker. I did a bunch of stuff. I worked all the time. And, but I didn't, and I'd go out I actually went to restaurant. I'd go to restaurants and go, well, they're not as good as French restaurants, But what I learned is I don't know. I don't know what I learned. I learned that I got to keep my ass going. That's for sure.
So what happened then? Did you stay? Were you staying in Boston?
I stayed in Boston for a while, and then I wanted to, I worked as a pastry chef at an inn at Wolfboro, New Hampshire for a while because I had never done pastry. I wasn't that good at it. And so I obviously said, I got to get a job doing that. And I didn't tell anyone at that place that I worked at that I had any degree or any culinary training. I just was interested in pastry. They hired me. And then the chef left, and the owner was like, what am I going to do? She was bawling. And I was like, well, I can probably help you. So I took over that place.
That's hysterical.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, I had a why in the road. I really wanted my own restaurant. So I got a job at Quilted Giraffe in New York as a sous chef, job offer. Barry Wine. And then I had Jim Nasicas, who was Stanford Court in San Francisco, just opened Deer Valley Ski Resort. And I got a job in the front of the house there. And I was like, I'm going to do that because I know nothing about it. I didn't know anything. So I got that job just based on lots of chutzpah, and as an assistant manager at their fine dining restaurant at Deer Valley Ski Resort, and that changed my world. Got me out west. Didn't know a thing, but I learned a lot. Great people. Bill Nasicas, still a friend. Talked to him this morning. Was running the place, and it was just an extraordinary. And they were all really well trained. All those people, like old school, hotel people. Swiss hotel school. Really great standards. So I learned a ton, and he brought me down to open the Boulders down in Carefree, Arizona. And I was a food and beverage director there for 8 years. So I was running the kitchens and I was involved, but I was out of the kitchens. But I really wanted to open my own restaurant, and I needed to learn the business side. So no better way to do that than the experience I had, frankly. And then that's it. Open Tarbells.
As a chef, I'm always asked the same question. What's your secret to making a restaurant quality dish at home? It's not just the ingredients, it's how you bring them to life, and it starts with the right tools. Heston's ProBond professional clad cookware collection will give you control, consistency, and confidence. It's cookware that makes you want to cook more. Check it out at HestonCulinary.com and use my promo code COOKWITHCHRIS for 10% off your first order. Well, I think it's really interesting that you recognized that you needed that. And I think that is the hard part about being in the business, is that we're so focused as cooks on cooking and technique.
Mm-hmm.
You're not taught to read P&Ls. You're not taught, you're really not taught really to do food cost. You're taught how to cook, right?
Mm-hmm.
How to be like super efficient, how to baste, like how to cook that fish perfectly, how to cut it, all the techniques are given. But then when it comes time for you to move into management, you're really not shown how to manage.
Yeah.
It's kind of learn from previous experience on how you're managing, which a lot of times isn't always the best way, right? Repetition of bad behavior, right?
Just scream louder.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that was the thing forever. But there isn't really that mentorship for these next steps of ownership. There's not a whole, which I talked to Mark Miller about this, and he brought it up to me. There should be a mentorship program from people who have graduated into this owning restaurants or multiple units, that they can mentor the next generation so they don't get hosed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Nobody teaches us about attorneys, about reading contracts, how to read a lease, how to negotiate a lease, how to negotiate a business partnership. None of that is explained to you. It's just like, good luck. You're going to go open your own place. Congrats. Well, hope you don't get screwed.
And unfortunately, a lot of us, when we say that when we're younger, we don't really mean it. We want them to fail. So I agree with you completely. And I think it's a big missing. So I think if you can put it out there, and people like Mark Miller would be incredibly helpful in mentoring. He really saw a lot. Very bright guy, incredibly, as you know. I think it's really important. I do the best I can. I've taken 3 people over the years and just what I called Open the Kimono. It's a 5-year program I designed. And, I know they're going to leave. I just don't want them to leave and fail. Plus I want another good place to eat in Phoenix. It's a little bit
Exactly. But no, high tides raise all ships.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you want the people that leave you to succeed.
Yes.
Right. The goal is for them because they put in hard work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Your goal is to see them win on their terms when they leave.
Yes.
And it's hard because, it's hard to see them go, but at the same time, you want them to go with the best skills possible.
Yes.
So there needs to be some form of training. And I think it's really incredible that you had enough mindset to recognize, like, I don't know any of this and I've got to do it.
Well, I'm not that smart, but I know the failure rate in restaurants is very high. And that's why I opened in Phoenix. I had already been here 8 years at the Boulders, and I had some notoriety in town here and nationally with wine. I got notoriety. I did a lot of wine speaking at Aspen and all kinds of other places during my time up there. But so I kind of leveraged that to, people caring that I opened. I wanted to go back east, I'll be honest. I really
Would you have gone to Boston or?
I wanted to go to Boston. Yeah. I felt there at that time there needed to be more restaurants in Boston, and it was still pretty light on good restaurants. And I also like Boston, love Boston. So
yeah, it's a great city. Great city.
Yeah.
So what was that like opening?
I was scared
after being. What was that like being out of the kitchen, right? Managing. Doing food for such a big property and then going back and starting it all over again.
Well, truth be told, I hated being out of the kitchen, especially at first. I didn't I couldn't attach any real fundamental core purpose and value to the experience up front. Everything in the kitchen is so real. Like you either get it done or I mean, there's so much you are given, your results are immediate, right? And the reaction of the results is immediate, where it's much more fluid and much more ethereal and a little bit more gray. There's a lot of gray in the front of the house. You have to manage the gray, but it is. So I was very uncomfortable with the lack of absolute black and white. Like I'd go to bussers and say, well, you didn't clear it in 30 seconds. That's my standard, and just lose it. And they're like, well, but someone dropped a fork over here. And I'm like, I don't give a shit. It's just good. So in the kitchen, you can use that rigor because it is pretty easier to do that, I would say. So I had to learn to like it. And what I found was I kind of ignited an intellectual side of me. As I was intellectually curious about P&Ls, which I never learned, and about leadership skills, which I failed at. And I'll be honest, chef, I was literally fired after my first year at the Boulders for being way too intense. I fired everybody. I was a food and beverage director. I tortured the pastry chef and the sous chefs and everybody. And I thought everyone was way below standard. And I was very, very intense. And they just were like, you're the agent of death. No one wants to work for you. So someone came to my defense, Bill Nasikas, and said, give him one more year and I'm going to look after him. And I had to learn how to communicate and be patient and nurture people and pet the little dog, and I wasn't trained that. I mean, I don't know about you, chef, but when I was brought up in the kitchen and restaurants, it wasn't that way. So.
No, it wasn't that way. And I think there is a difference in the front than it is in the back, right? But also it just doesn't. I think the thing is like I said this years ago, and I think it's really relevant. Like, when people are in the military and they're learning to fire a weapon, there's a man standing in their ear yelling at them because they want to scare the shit out of them when they're firing their weapon because they want to make sure they can still hit the target when they're scared out of their mind. Right? Yes. When we're in the kitchen, if we're barking at somebody's ear, all it takes is 3 seconds to overcook the fish. Right? It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's true.
It doesn't work. And we're all guilty of losing our temper.
Yeah.
Right? But I think learning to manage your temper and work within the confines of each individual and how they work better. Some people need to be coddled. Some people need to be pushed. Some people need to be elevated to get them to be able to succeed, right? And it's a learning curve, right? To figure out which person is what. And I don't think that wasn't taught to us as becoming managers.
No.
Right? And it's working towards each person's strength to get them to succeed, not badgering their weakness to make them fail.
Yes.
And I think that was never shown to us, right? And it took me a long time to figure that out because I was always badgered for my weakness. So what did I think was right? Right? I was pushed upon for it. So that is a hard thing to overcome. It is a hard thing to change. And once you change that and somebody guides you, like, was done with Mr. Nasikas, that really changes who you are, because then you have somebody who's running you down the river in the right. No, don't. You're going down the rapids again. Take this road. It's a little bit easier and it'll work better. Then you start to see the effects of that happening. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's a hard learning lesson. And sometimes falling on your face is kind of like the kick in the teeth, right? Like you fall on your face, you knock your teeth out, and somebody's going to help you put your teeth back in. And that's unfortunately the way that a lot of people learn. Learning the hard way is not always the best, but it does definitely get it done pretty quickly.
Back to your need for mentorship.
Exactly. Right. We really all needed it. Like I really wish there was more of it. Right. Yeah. I think there's tons of mentorship to teach people how to cook. Right. Yes. And now there's more opportunities than ever with YouTube videos and Instagram videos. And there's more than we ever had. Right.
YouTube like University, baby.
Yeah. And it's, let's be honest, at first we all knocked it, right? We were making fun of it. We thought it was a bad thing. But now You're like, oh, wow, where did you see that technique? Oh, well, I saw this on so-and-so's new YouTube channel who's teaching you how, and you're like, oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yes. It also speeds up trends and fads and things like that and interest, but
Yes.
also what it does, a highly educated public, including young kids, you have to, it leans more and more on service and experience, because having a culinary hook is not that, it's very difficult because it's all out there. There's really no hooks or new prep, ways to prep or present, or new combinations of ingredients or regions that haven't been explored. It's literally all out there.
Oh,
And
yeah, everything's out there nowadays.
And in some ways at very high level, actually.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a really interesting thing, because like, remember, to find something new, you had to travel.
mm-hmm.
To find something new, you had a photocopy of a menu that somebody had, or somebody took a menu. Nobody had, you would take a little click and snap photos of restaurants, dishes, steal a menu if you could, and lots of notes, right? It wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
I think it's a totally different thing.
It is. And I don't know, I've been around a long time, so I think we have some inertia, like people come to Tarbell's just out of habit and whatnot. But being a new restaurant, you see what people are doing. They're spending $10 million, $50 million, whatever on build outs. And I think it's actually kind of necessary to create a splash and a reason to go. It's experiential, right? You're right. Traveling, you were bringing in secrets and being able to,
yeah.
I started in Phoenix, my restaurant. I was doing things that I did in France, and I was like, this isn't that really complicated or new, or, you know what I mean? And people were like, oh my gosh, he's changing the world. And I'm like, it's poireau vinaigrette. It's leeks with vinaigrette. It's not really that complicated. Anyway, that doesn't.
But that changed, I think, and that's the thing, like, the doors are open more so than ever.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's a floodgate of information. Every few years, there's a new I'll call it the it culture, right? Like, what is the new hit culture of food, right? So what is the next it culture of food? What has it been, right? So it's like floating through all these different places. And I think that's interesting and really special, because every culture is getting its time in the spotlight, right? Yeah. For so long it was French, and then it was Spanish and an Italian, right? And then you have different Americanas, so I think it's really cool to see all of them get their just deserve.
Yeah.
But yes, the techniques and the plating styles, and it's become ubiquitous.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Whether you're a Michelin star restaurant that's rolling your cucumber or zucchini, you can find that same thing in an everyday restaurant now. But
yeah,
that's
probably in Omaha.
But that's putting that everyday restaurant in the weeds, because they have 19 cooks at the Michelin 3 doing these beautiful detailed plate work, where you literally have one dude in garde-manger who's going down like the Titanic, trying to roll their cucumbers and, do these beautiful plate works. And he's got like 50 salads on the rail, and the chef's yelling at him to get his, rolled cucumbers right. I think there's a time and place for everything. Yeah. Right. And I think that's what makes it fun.
I think, I'm still locked in. I think cooking from the heart and with authenticity, whatever that is for you, and staying true to that is probably the only thing that can still be, you connect with customers. I may be wrong, but that's what I've always done. And that's what we're getting back to, really, is just cooking from the heart. And, if it's a meatball, I just make the meatball. I don't try to make it meatball with, stuffed with, guava jelly, or something.
No, but you make it the best meatball that there is.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. Like, I had a friend reached out and said, hey, I have a friend whose kid wants to go to culinary school, right? Can you talk to him? Can you give him some advice? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I get on the phone with the kid, and he's like, oh, I work at this pizza restaurant. I'm like, okay. He's like, I'm bored. And I was like, you're bored? And I was like, how are you bored? I was like, what's the weight of your dough? And he's like, I don't know. What's your hydration level? Well, I don't know. I said, what's the fermentation process? I don't know. Right? Are you using mixed flours? Are you using double O from Italy? I don't know. I said, well, you can't say you're bored because you haven't even dug in.
Yeah.
right? If you're going to make pizza, learn to truly make pizza. Live and breathe it, because when you leave there and somebody sees that you made pizza at this really well-respected restaurant from a really talented chef, they're going to say, hey, how did you make that dough? And if your answer is, I don't know, I don't know. That's the wrong answer, right? Yeah. Because you become an asset to your next employer because you understand dough work. So maybe you don't make a pizza dough, but maybe you can translate that into pita, or you translate that into making a baguette, right? Absolutely. So it's making the best at whatever it is that you're doing in that moment, whether it's a hamburger, a meatball, a slice of pie, the best sandwich you've ever had. And I think there's a disconnect. And I think when you have heart and soul in what you're doing, it translates through. Yeah.
And curiosity. I think it's so, I think what you gave, that advice you gave is brilliant. I'm going to steal that, because that was, I get those calls too, but that's really good, because you really drilled down on how much he really wasn't there, and he wasn't learning anything. He was bored because he wasn't curious.
He wasn't curious. Like, it's the same thing with a burger. What's your blend?
I know.
Right? Like, there's a million blends that you can do. What's your fat to meat ratio? What's your muscle cuts you're using? Are you using any offal cuts in your burgers, which are a really unique secret that a lot of people don't realize, right? Beef heart and spleen in a burger elevates the flavor profile through the ceiling, but people don't recognize that, don't even know it's even an option. Yeah. So knowing those key things, or are they just buying a pre-bought blend from your local, distributor or butcher? Yeah. But knowing those things wins. Yes. Right? That's what makes you a better cook in the long haul. So I think, I don't know. I think there is sometimes the overstimulus of information is making people bored instead of them, because they're so focused on what's coming up and what's new and what's hot. They're not focused on what is right in front of them and the potential of what's right there.
I agree. Yes.
Right?
Well I don't know. No, I agree with you.
So what is it like now? Tarbell's is how many years right now?
31 years.
That's a lifetime for a restaurant.
Oh my gosh. I think it's like a lot of lifetimes.
How has that been? And kind of talk about the changes, right? Like it from when you open and then you've got a 10-year birthday, that's a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you said it earlier, most restaurants don't make it within the first year.
Yes. It's 1, 3, 5. Those were the big ones for me. 1 year, making it 1 year is oftentimes when there's failure. And then 3 years, if you can string it along long enough, you're just hanging on, you tend to close. And if you have a really rich investor and you're still losing money after 5 years, they get tired and close after 5 years. So, and with me, I didn't. I just sold everything in my life and drove a Ford van for 4 years, and which I'm proud to have done. Would do it today, and I did everything. I did AP, I did payroll by hand, I did everything. I worked nonstop, 7 days a week. I had no problem with work. And then I would just collapse every 40 days or so. And, it's been, so changes. Yeah, I think getting 5 years was a big deal, and then 10. And then after that, I will say my philosophy is super simple. I just wake up every day and truly, this is the first day I'm open. Nothing that's happened, no award, no recognition, not how many meals we served last night, does not matter, because from a guest perspective, it doesn't matter. The people coming in that night, that is the only thing that matters to them, really. Now, something might have drawn them there, a recommendation or an article or something, but really what matters is their experience that night. And I feel like if we have that very granular attention every single day for 31 years, we will have the privilege of opening the next day. And I have a tremendous fear of failure. I had 3 goals when I opened. This is true. I wrote them down. I still have them on a sheet of legal pad. Number 1, stay open. Number 2, to be the 3rd best restaurant in Phoenix. And number 3, refer to number 1, stay open. And that was it.
I love that.
I kept it really simple. The third best restaurant thing was, I noticed at the time there were these things, cute things called newspapers, and there were like food writers. And
I've never seen one.
I know, right?
Why don't you explain that to a lot of the listeners? Because I don't think they know what a
they were like
newspaper is.
Paper and, like really wild. And your fingers got dirty when you read it. But
they serve fish and chips in them in some countries.
Totally appropriate for that. But they would give, 5-star reviews, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 being best. And I noticed the 8 years I was in Phoenix, the most powerful writer at Arizona Republic, Ellen Jeffords, would give 3 or 4 or 5 stars, and all the 5-star restaurants didn't make it over time. And I was like, I don't want to be the best restaurant, and I want to be I want to get a 3-star. I want to get like, he's okay, he's fine, and no one would pay attention really, or hopefully I can earn my business every day. So that was my goal for I still want to be the 3rd best restaurant in Phoenix. Someday I'll get there.
That is a really interesting and very well thought out process.
Yeah.
Like I've never thought about it like that. And you were really, it's like the 5 stars were going away, but the ones that weren't 5 stars weren't.
And people, my chef friends from Europe and all kinds of stuff, everyone was like, well, your food's so simple. It's just like, like you're serving salmon and Caesar salad. I said, yeah, I know. Part of me as a chef, I'll be honest. Yeah, I didn't want to serve Caesar salad. It's not even Caesar salad. It's a creamy dressing on romaine lettuce these days. But it has been my number one salad for like 31 years. So I'm like, and so I tell people, hate the salmon, but the salmon buys my caviar and truffles and my soft shell crabs and my fiddlehead ferns and, and I don't have a trust fund. So
there's a balance to be had on the menu,
yes.
Right? And I think that there's understanding that, which you are, like you have lost leaders, and then you have things that people love.
Yeah.
You have to have a balance. It can't just all be esoteric, overly expensive. It has to be things that people can resonate with and give them something to drive towards.
Yes.
And you did that.
Yeah. And I continue to do it. And there's a chef part of me that hates it. I took the salmon off the menu 3 times in my 31-year career, and with epic failure. I had a group of people come in, Jerry Colangelo, who's a basketball guy, he owned the Phoenix Suns, and he brought in 5 guys during the day. We weren't open for lunch, and he goes, Mark, I need to sit down and talk about the salmon. You took it off the menu.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like,
wow.
All right, going back on.
But that tells you like signatures are important.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a really, really important thing to touch on. There are people who take signatures off the menu because they're bored.
Yeah.
But a signature is what becomes a part of you, right? Like it's a thing, right? Like if you take that off the menu, there is a whole slew of guests who have been coming that tell everybody about it. They may not get it that time they bring in the others because they want the others to get it and they'll get something else. It's something that continuously draws people in the door and becomes something that it transcends you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important. And I do recall people like saying, I've had cooks be like, really, do I have to cook this again? I'm so over this. And I'm like, but dude, it's about consistency. And we've got this dish that everybody loves. They tell their friends, their family, they may not get it every time, but they get it every second time, or they get it every third time, or they get one for the table to share. So don't knock something that has become such an integral part of your DNA.
Yeah. And the challenge is keeping it consistent for years. It's really something. Yeah.
It is. And I think that that's one of the things for a lot of folks that they struggle with, right? Like they want to be creative. They want to keep pushing the envelope, but sometimes pushing the envelope, you could push the envelope everywhere else. Just leave the signatures alone.
And I learned that the hard way so many times, being a creative and just getting, as you say, bored and frustrated and wanting to move ahead and not wanting to get stuck into an old rubber chicken restaurant. I changed the whole menu in 2017, October. It was October 16th, actually. I remember it quite well. It was a Friday. And I just went horizontal instead of vertical. I did everything. I took everything off the menu, put all new stuff on. It was like the worst thing I ever did, and I changed back. And people still talk about it. I changed the menu back to the original menu 4 days later, I think 5 days later. But there are people that still talk about it today that I moved their cheese. I wrecked Tarbells for them that 4
Wow.
days. Yeah. So, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. And, so yeah, I did that. I would just caution anyone to listen to what you just said, Chef, was you have to respect those standards and just do them brilliantly and honor them and know that that's what gives you permission to do other things and gives you the funding, frankly, and the all that to be able to do other stuff.
It has to, right? You have to have that. There's a balance. There's a balance to be had. There's things that pay the bills, and there's things that you can call the frills.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good line.
Right? And it's really knowing that, right? It takes a while to recognize that.
Yeah.
So 31 years.
Yes.
That's amazing, right? Now here's one for you. Perception versus reality. Social media versus real life. What is your thought on that within the restaurant? I mean, like you said, when you opened this restaurant, social media didn't exist. There was newspapers. We were having reviewers. We had food arts. That was our biggest sort. That was like the New York Times food section. Food arts was our biggest, most important form of culinary news, right?
The Batterberries.
Yes, the Batterberries, right? And if we were lucky, we got our art culinaire every quarter, right? Mm-hmm. And then there was, of course, Food and Wine and Bon Appetit. But now, social media. What is your thought about that comparative to those days, and how it works now?
Well, broadly, all of that is just a replacement of communication, of media, if you will. The interesting part of it, and I think it's generally very good, it's putting in the hands of many, the reporting, if you will, the reviewing of restaurants. Now, with that, you get, and the argument on most of my friends' side is you get uneducated views on your restaurant. But I argue, they're really the ones paying the bills. They're the ones that their opinion does count. We've always listened to it, whether it used to be, they'd send a letter or something or a phone call, and you could address it one-on-one, but now it's done anonymously and through a broad distribution. And if it's more inflammatory, and it's really more about, in the end, it's more about them than it is about you. They want to be heard, they want to be recognized and things like that. But we take it all seriously. We read it and we try to learn. It's just like when we got an article, we would read it and try to see if we could learn something from it in the past. So it's just the volume is intense. And then there's all kinds of segments. We could talk about influencers because there's some that are very good and helpful and very integrous. And then there's many that aren't, varying degrees, I would say, or just trying to climb their way up and do something. But it is really the authority. When there was one authority, like New York Times food writer had so much power, and frankly, it was their opinion. Now, they were rather experienced and educated and things like that, but it's still their opinion, right? But one person carried almost too much weight in some cases, I would believe. The gatekeepers were rather small and narrow. It could be influenced by relationships, some magazines and things like that. So now you have no control really over it other than what you put out.
Yeah, I do think that, when Twitter and Instagram first came out, right, it was a picture and very limited number of words, right, with Twitter, and then Instagram, of course, gave you more. But it allowed chefs to timestamp and put out their own food without journalism telling people what they should see. Right. And that was the freedom it gave chefs.
Yes.
But finally, it was like, hey, check this out. I'm doing this. This is coming out. This is coming. And it really kind of allowed you to push it out there without having a publication telling the public what you were doing.
Right.
But like you said, now it's just a broad spectrum, right? It's just constantly evolving.
I think it's gotten so blurry. People are just choosing their own preferential channel. So
yeah.
And
I agree. It's gone back to like being a magazine, right? Their algorithm is kind of pigeonholing them into that direction. So like, okay, here's a Bon Appetit crew, here's a Food and Wine crew, here's a Batterberry crew, food arts, and it's just directing people down those channels.
And I think which I don't do a very good job of, but we need to find out, we have to speak to those channels. And I think internally, we don't really do a lot of social media. We're bad at it. But when I get organized about it, what I would tell them to do is this isn't about your message or even my message. It actually has to be about the restaurants. Only communicate the singular message of the restaurant. And hopefully that will attach itself to the algorithms that are appealing to the people that could be our customers.
What's been your worst professional mistake?
Well, that week I took off changed the whole menu was certainly one of them. Gosh, there have been so many. I mean, I make them every day. So I don't know. Yeah, I have to say that was probably one of my most painful ones. I've done some things, sometimes when you help people, I got sideways just, helping. It hurt me financially, helping another restaurant group. There's been a lot of silly stuff like that where, I've consulted for 6 months and haven't been paid, that kind of stuff.
Well, those are always fun.
Yeah. Or you're going to get a piece, I developed an app once and you're going to get a piece of it. And once it launched, I never heard from him. It's fine. But that's my fault. I needed a Chef Gordon, a manager, which I never had. And he's a dear friend, but he was never been my manager. But someone to say, remember, get the money, always remember to get the money, never forget to always remember to get the money. That's Chef
or have a signed contract.
Right. I mean, yeah, of course. But that's his famous.
One can lead to the other. Yeah. Always get your pay. Always get paid.
Get paid first.
Yeah.
Yeah. It certainly limits the amount of work you actually do because you ask for money first and it trims out about 90% of the requests.
Yeah, it sure does. Do you have any regrets?
There's no regrets. Just know that I could have taken a different path. I always imagine what would happen if I'd stayed in New York and worked for Barry Wine at Quilted Giraffe, because that was a burgeoning time for New York City as well. Bourdain was cooking at the time then, and of course Daniel was still working for the Mastrione. It was just, different time. It would have been fun to be a part of that crew if I was so lucky, to grow into that. And then, having Shep as my friend, there was a time when I asked about being a manager, him being a manager, or getting me some gigs or whatever. And then he told me he would ruin my life, if he was successful, and he was certain he would. And I decided just to be his friend. And there were times when I thought, I could have done something maybe, but who knows? I've actually been pretty hesitant, resistant to any kind of fame. I only do media stuff, to keep my brand going. And I'm really more focused on my market here in Phoenix, because that's really my 7-day-a-week customer. So I guess that would be my, what ifs, I suppose.
So your New York experience, we didn't really talk about it and what it was like at the Quilted Giraffe.
I didn't work there. I chose not to.
You chose not to?
No, I declined that and went to Deer Valley Ski Resort. Is that kind of that little inkling in the back of your head? That's what I meant. Yeah. Had I gone, instead of Deer Valley, gone to Quilted Giraffe, which was like the hottest restaurant at the time.
Oh my God, that place, the stories it's like of Studio 54 of a restaurant.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
I don't even know if I'd be alive still, frankly.
That's probably the truth. That's that right there.
Yeah.
And I apologize for misunderstanding that answer.
No, I did not work there, but I was offered a sous chef job. Yeah.
That's crazy to think, like that era of those restaurants in that time.
Yeah. It would have been fun.
What has been your most memorable meal?
Gosh, there have been so many, but, I've always liked simple food. Mark Meno, when he was really a big deal, 1 star, he did some really, really great food. And I think the service experience at Tarbell, which was a long time 3-star restaurant in Paris, many, many decades, that was really service driven. I worked there briefly, and it was all about service, and food was secondary. That was the first French restaurant I worked in where that was the case. That was the philosophy. But I think I've always liked roasted chicken, perfectly poulet de Bresse, perfectly roasted chicken. And when I was going to Culinary school in the early 80s, Chez Ami Louis was not a famous restaurant. It was kind of a place where locals and chefs went to get the chicken. And I had several, went there quite a bit. And his chicken was perfect. And everything was perfect. His pommana and, with butter and his haricot vert. It was just very simple. But, it's just those things that haunt your memory. He did a very light jus or almost light demi-glace of chicken that kind of brush it with, which is deep in flavor. So, and I find doing a perfectly roasted chicken is not that easy, actually.
No, it's actually really hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. What won't you eat?
Well, these days, I would eat anything, but I don't think I'm going back to those black eggs, for example. I still will eat the grubs and ants and things like that in Mexico, crickets and whatnot. Even though the grubs are, they're kind of gross, but yeah, in a taco, they're okay. I'm not much interested in, like fish eyes and some kinds of offal anymore. But yeah, I'll eat almost anything.
If you could sit down and have dinner with anyone, with us or gone, who would it be?
Well, first you, chef, but we got to get a meal. But gosh, I was able to, get to or have spent time with like Anthony Bourdain and, legends like that. And Julia Child, I knew very well. I met her in Boston, actually, when I was at that restaurant. She lived in Cambridge. I met her and became friendly with her for all of her, the rest of her life. So people that I would, in the world of culinary.
It could be anything. It doesn't have to be culinary.
Well, I always find notable characters in history interesting. Like, I think Winston Churchill was interesting. He was a great wordsmith, and I really like words. They're fun for me. So I think he would have been, I don't know if he would have been fun to have dinner with, but he was a great writer, great wordsmith. Probably a boorish drunk. I'm not quite sure. Yeah. I don't know.
I'm sure he would be interesting. He definitely liked food. We know he liked his
Lincoln before the plague.
Yes, that would be good.
He was a good wordsmith too.
Very much so.
Yeah.
What has been your biggest culinary flop? Remember when the Bataberries used to have What Did They Know? That whole section where the dish they thought was brilliant, they put it on the menu and it just tanked miraculously. Right? We all just saw it going down. Remember that? That was like my favorite section of food arts because everybody admitted their faults, right? It was like it was a cool thing. Like, I think we get to a certain point in our career and being able to be comfortable with saying, you know what? I really screwed up. This was not as good as I thought it was.
There have been so many, and I try not to dwell on negatives, so it's going to take me a minute. But I remember I thought bacala was going to be the next thing. And I think the salted cod.
Yeah.
And it was for like 10 people in the country. I think it was really a delicacy. But I made a big deal out of it at one of my restaurants. And I think I did a bacala gratin. I got really behind it and horrified so many people because they believed me. They're like, oh, cod, I love cod. And then they're like, bleh.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite? Was that just like a dish that just nobody could handle the intensity of the salted cod?
It's salty and fishy and I mean, bacala, salted cod was very important to an economy in the Middle Ages, but maybe not so much now. Let's see, anything else I did? I mean, there's been so many things. I mean, that does strike me though. Gosh, I don't know if I've really, I mean, I try things all the time. So I think, chef, you may be the same. It doesn't always work, but I get rid of it really quickly. And then I kind of forget about it. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I mean, I think we have to try things, but like when we try to stick to our guns sometimes because we think it's so good, it backfires on us. And again, we have to learn better.
Yeah.
Experiment on your team, not on your guests.
I did probably 18 or 20 years ago. I did soca, those, the chickpea, the Southern Provence thing. And I was going to take pizza off the menu and just do soca because I was obsessed with it. And I tried it. I really hammered it. Like I was getting lots of negative feedback and lots of pushback. And, I probably tried it for a month or maybe 3 months. And finally on the side, we'd start making pizzas, to kind of try to transition it. I would always do. And it just never worked. I was so in love with them though. And I thought it was the next thing. I thought it was going to, make people stop eating pizza or, whatever. But
you were ahead of the curve on the gluten-free trend.
Yeah. And it wasn't even that, I just thought it was a fabulous vehicle for those Mediterranean
It's delicious.
flavors.
It's an absolutely delicious vehicle.
And now, again, my buddy Chris Bianco, I think 6 years ago, put it on his menu at Tratto, and he's killing it. I'm like, you fucking bastard. I love Chris, man.
He's amazing.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite cookbook?
Log Technique, I still go back to that the first one. I still have the copy of my original cookbook. And, I own a lot of cookbooks, not as many as you. I see your walls, but I treasure them, but most of them are just treasured copies and I don't really use them that much.
What's your favorite kitchen smell?
I don't know. There's nothing better than a sauteed onion. I don't know. I mean, that says you're cooking, but yeah, chorizo spice. I like that today, especially when you're toasting it.
Oh, for sure.
I like toasting cumin. That might be one of my favorite. You take cumin powder and toast it in a dry pan and it just changes it. It's so much better.
It's so magical when you toast the spice, right? It releases all those oils and aromas. It just changes everything. Must-have kitchen tool.
Wow. Well, I think the simple is a knife, but I do like, as I started my life because my family used only cast iron pans, my mom. And so I had a lot of experience with them. And then I kind of got into it in my mid-career at Tarbell's for a while there and used them a lot. And I think they're just so versatile. And if you treat them right, you can do anything in them, actually. So maybe that would be it.
One piece of advice for a young cook.
Go in, just be curious and go in with your eyes open. Don't imagine it to be a celebrity thing and learn to love the hard. If you love the hard and you actually really drink it in and you go looking for the hard and anywhere in the kitchen and anywhere in the restaurant or in life, you will have a better experience. You'll grow faster. You'll learn faster. You'll find some deep human satisfaction and achievement and be able to achieve the hard and overcome it every day. And because you have two choices, you can work very little and avoid the hard things in life or in a kitchen, and you'll still be working and you'll still go home smelling, or you can just dive in and go home exhausted, muscles tired, and really feel like you've done something. You will physically and mentally feel like you've achieved something, you've overcome something.
Do you think it's important to read your reviews?
I used to say no, but I do think it's very important, not for the good stuff, but for the bad stuff. Filter out anything that's a platitude or flattering. I now think it's important to share that with your team. But for me, it's very damaging to read good news and good reviews, and only helpful to read bad reviews, even if they're, people say, well, this person, blah, 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 they don't know what they're talking about. I said, well, no, if you go in with that mindset, you'll learn nothing. Because even in a very poorly written, or the motivation for the review is not pure, you can still learn something.
Your favorite food city?
Gosh, it's really changing all over, but I have to say, because I've most recently been going there a lot, is Mexico City.
What's important to you when hiring a new cook?
I also want to say New York City. I still have to love New York. I was just there. There's just so much great food, and it always will be. I'm sorry, most important thing in hiring someone?
What's important to you when hiring a new cook?
Well, it's not about their experience or what they know. It's what they bring attitudinally and culturally and from their to the experience. Are they going to be in alignment with your cultural team? Because the best trained chef in the world, if they're not culturally and their professional maturity doesn't align with your team, it's not going to work. It's going to cause conflict.
What makes you happy as a chef?
Just hair on fire, expo, working, also probably a little bit of pantry and saute behind me, and just on the edge of teetering on the edge of it all collapsing.
I love that. All right, quick fire questions. Coffee or tea?
Tea today, coffee in life.
Pancakes or waffles?
I love to make waffles because I like to do hand-whipped egg whites for my kids, but I actually enjoy a really good pancake.
Oatmeal or yogurt?
Ooh, gosh, I have to say, that's crazy. I do really love oatmeal. With maple syrup.
With maple syrup?
Yeah, not brown sugar.
Okay. Bacon or sausage?
Depends, but I will say the pork chop bacon here in Arizona is some of the best bacon in the world. Sausage is so varied. I just don't like sausage with sugar in it.
Chicken or duck? Beef or pork?
Pork.
Quail or squab? Hot dog, hamburger?
Ooh. Because it's so rare to have a perfect hot dog.
Ketchup or mustard?
Mustard.
French fries, onion rings?
French fries. Thin cut.
Thin cut. Taco, burrito?
Taco. Crispy, if criante, if possible.
Pasta or noodles?
Pasta.
Ravioli or dumplings?
Ravioli.
Raw oysters, raw clams?
Raw oysters.
Lobster or crab?
Ooh, there's so many different kinds. I'd say crab because it gives you more option.
Sea urchin, caviar?
Sea urchin. Fresh.
Black or white truffles?
Black. From Provence or Périgord, only those. And the right variety.
Meatballs or sausage?
Meatballs.
Favorite pizza style?
Margarita.
That was amazing. I just heard somebody yell about a Target card.
Oh, that's my daughter.
Butter or olive oil?
Ooh, I'm using a lot more olive oil these days, but I'm like Frenchy trained, man. Escheray butter, if you give me that, it's that all day long.
Duck fat, pork fat? Favorite acid?
Lemon.
Do you prefer red wine or white wine?
I prefer white Burgundy for overall whites because it's red wine like. And then I really like Bordeaux or any good sturdy red Italian or anything.
Light beer, dark beer?
That depends where it's made. I've been a long appreciative lover of Guinness, but every day for me would be something quite light. I like crisp and light, and I'm not an IPA person.
White spirits, dark spirits?
Brown liquor.
Favorite sparkling?
Oof.
Champagne, Lambrusco, Cava, Prosecco?
It's champagne. Yeah, good champagne.
Are you a dessert or a cheese guy?
Cheese.
Do you prefer chocolate or fruit?
Chocolate.
Honey or maple syrup?
Maple syrup.
Favorite candy?
I don't like candy that much, but it would be chocolate.
Fast food?
It's so funny. I don't really eat fast food, except my wife's 100-year-old grandpa turned me on to In-N-Out Burger because he grew up near the first one. And
Okay.
I find it fantastic. I don't like their French fries, though.
Fair.
They're not crispy.
Late night snack?
Popcorn, baby, it could be with anything, but I like it olive oil, salt. I like it butter and soy. Butter and soy is really good. Escheray butter and soy.
Oh, that sounds good.
Oh, yeah, baby.
What's the guilty pleasure?
It's that. It's anything salty, crunchy.
And what would be your last meal?
Yeah, I think I would, go back to those early days in the 80s of Chez Ami Louis and the perfect poulet de Bresse roasted chicken with haricots verts and that are sauteed in a little bit of shallot and butter. And then some sort of very crispy butter-soaked, well-grown potato, like true good potato, flavorful.
That sounds great. So, Chef, if somebody wants to find the restaurant on social media, what's the best way for them to find it?
Oh, boy, I'm so in tune with this, but I think it's like Tarbell's restaurant at Tarbell's restaurant.
I'll make sure the link's there for everybody.
Yeah. And sorry. I think I'm at Mark Tarbell. I'm not sure. Pretty sure.
Chef, thank you for taking time. I know you've got a lot going on. I know you've been at the restaurant since early, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're the best. Thank you, Chef. You're the best. I really appreciate it. It was so good talking with you today.
Super fun, right? I think, it's like, that's part of the reason why I do this. I get to talk with my friends and really, we get to share a lot with the world out there. And I think it's really important to just kind of keep educating.
Keep going because it's good stuff you bring out.
Thank you.
All right. Bless you. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to How the Sausage is Made. If you've liked what you've heard today, please make sure to like and subscribe, and don't be afraid to tell your friends about it.